give me one shot here on a blue chip stock. Believe me, Kevin, the only problem you're gonna have is that you didn't buy more.
Nobody knows if the stock is gonna go up, down, sideways, or in circles.
What is good, NBA draft fans? Your boys are back after a week hiatus. It is the Wolves of Ball Street, the Draftdaq NBA Draft Podcast. My name is Corey Teleba, and I am here, as always, with my co-host, Garbage Time, Albert Gim. Albert, what's good, my dude?
What's going on, dude? It's been a while. I feel like we haven't recorded in a minute, you know?
It feels way longer than it actually has been.
Mhm.
But, you know, Thanksgiving week. And then besides the holiday, we had a very eventful scouting week. You know, both of us opposite ends of the coasts, teaming up with other No Ceilings team members. So why don't we start with your trip out to Vegas with our guy backcourt violation, Mr. Tyler Rucker. Tell me a little bit about, pull the curtain aside a little bit for the people. What was it like, credentialed NBA draft analyst Albert Gim out in Vegas?
It was quite the experience. It was really humbling. I don't know, man. It just felt like a great honor to be there. You know, to be, as you mentioned, like it's weird to think about it in those types of terms, like being a credentialed media member, but it was really dope. I mean, some of the perks were awesome. We were literally on the floor for over an hour before the game started. We were watching the players warm up. I literally stood less than 2 feet away from Chet Holmgren. He was putting up shots, maybe, I don't, dude, he was so close to me, I could almost smell him, which is weird. But
How'd he smell?
It was fantastic. He smelled like he smelled like a number one pick is what he smelled like.
Oh.
He was awesome. It was really awesome watching UCLA warm up. Awesome. And you know, that's something that I think I really got to grasp in person, but also Rucker helped me to understand. Watching these players warm up is actually really, really important. To watch their demeanor, their posture, their attitude during warmups was really interesting. Me being someone who, you know, never played any significant level of basketball or was a coach or anything, watching them warm up and to see the engagement of some of these top players was an experience. So it was awesome, man. It was really, really great. A little intel on Rucker. Rucker is Corey's already laughing because Rucker is an awesome dude. It was really great to finally meet in person. We realized that Rutgers literally met none of us at No Ceilings ever in person, so I was the first one. I had the great honor of meeting Mr. Rucker live and in person. We shared a room, which was an experience. You know what happened in that room?
Right. How many beds? How many
Two beds.
Wow.
2 beds. Thankfully, I know. Rucker's a high roller, man. He got us a room at the MGM, two queen beds. You know, we talked to each other before falling asleep. You know, it was an intimate time. But
Nice.
yeah, it was a great experience, dude.
So what about the actual hoops itself?
Oh God, the hoops itself. Okay, so first off, I want to say I'll try to give my really quick Chet thing here. Chet is nowhere near as skinny in person as he looks on TV, which is crazy if you think about it.
Yeah.
I was actually really impressed, like when I was up close with him. He's got sort of a back, like he's got some back muscles or some mass to his back, which was nice to see. His legs are not as skinny either in person as I thought they would be. Just overall, he didn't look frail, which was really exciting because that was like one of my big things with him. And it made like just watching him in person, I was like, oh, he is gonna get bigger. He's gonna add mass. He's gonna get stronger. There's a lot to like here. And then with the play, the biggest thing that popped off the screen, well, not the screen, haha, I was in person. The IQ is insane. The guy he processes the game on a much higher level than the guys that he's playing against. It was insane. Like we were just sitting there watching, and we're like, wow, he's reading the floor so much faster and reacting so much faster than everybody else. So that was awesome to see. Peyton Watson, I know you like Peyton Watson a lot.
Yes.
I enjoyed him a lot. Yes, he is extremely raw, but there is so much to like about him. Like if you look at the physical tools alone, it's awesome. The way that he moves, awesome. The shooting will come, I think. And something that Rucker was showing me with him was the inconsistency in the footwork. But as he
Yeah.
works on that and develops that, he's going to be a really good player, in my opinion. So if you're high on Peyton Watson, do not sell your stock. The kid just needs time and minutes on the floor. He's going to be really freaking good. Your boy Jaquez,
Yes, sir.
wow. I loved watching him play, not just in the game, but in warmups too. He's really something to watch. Strother, Gonzaga, awesome. That guy,
Yeah.
really, really fun. There are a lot of guys in Gonzaga actually that were fun, but Strother is a guy that I'm going to be writing about actually because I was so
Let's
impressed by
go.
his game. Yeah,
Loved
I
it.
was so impressed by him. I was like, oh, I'm going to have to write about him. So
Gonna
that's
have to
something
take
I'm
out the
working on.
trash.
But yeah, I'll stop there because I'll just go too long. But yeah, Strother was really impressive.
Love to hear it. Very interesting. I mean, bunch of guys you listed are big time favorites of mine. If anything with Watson, not only am I holding, I'm buying more because his price is lowered. So I'm
Yeah.
buying even more of the Watson stock. But that's for a different episode. While you were in Vegas, well, I guess not simultaneously, but around the same time, I headed to Brooklyn, New York to meet up with Nathan from Draftdaq and
Oh
also
yeah.
Team No Ceilings, and we got to watch a few games together. We watched Xavier versus Iowa State, and then we watched Memphis take on Virginia Tech. And obviously, we went to see Imani Bates and Jalen Duren. Obviously, Duren is the guy who we needed to monitor for this particular class. But the guy I left most impressed with, and again, we've been giving this guy a lot of shout outs and he deserves them. Simon Rath, Tyrese Hunter from Iowa State really put on a show, and he was so impressive in person. He's small, he's tiny, obviously, but he's got like an NBA body. He moves like an NBA guy. He reminds me a little bit, like he has a little bit of that Donovan Mitchell type of guard in him. Now obviously Donovan Mitchell is a little bit bigger, so that matters. Bouncier, all of that. So I'm not saying that Tyrese Hunter is going to be a guy that comes in and has some kind of impact. He might not even come out. He might not even come out this year. But the dude has been awesome. He was super, super impressive, and that was kind of the cool thing about going to watch that little tournament, because we went in looking to break down the blue chips, and we left super impressed by this guard from Iowa State. Paul Scruggs from Xavier, kind of a draft Twitter shadow guy, was terrible. Just was truly unimpressive in every way imaginable, other than his body and his length. Just did not look like an NBA prospect, and he's a 5th-year college player, so that's not like I'm going out on a major limb there.
Right.
We didn't. Gosh, the Memphis game was a tough watch. It's terrible. It's truly terrible. The best part of it was, like you said, being down by the court, watching warm-ups, seeing what Jalen Duren looked like in person.
Right.
Just behemoth. He's a monstrous man. He just looked gigantic. Amani didn't look as skinny, kind of like Chet. He looked a little bit more filled out in person than I think he probably does on the screen, although his ankles are, you could probably put your hand around them. But other than that, neither Bates nor Duren were impressive, at the tournament in Brooklyn. There was some foul trouble. Then Memphis just doesn't have a point guard. And I think, with Duren, that's going to be one of the things that we have to take into consideration with our evals. Like, he's the type of guy who's going to look better in the NBA because he's going to have NBA caliber guards who are actually able to get him the basketball. And I think that's going to be inconsistent. And he's not just going to be able to, impose his will at times, because college is a different game. You can pack the paint more, play zones, and, take him out of what he does. So it's something to be cognizant of. But outside of the fact that Nena's Taqueria was closed because there were not that many people at the Barclay Center, and I was really looking forward to the potential of having some burrito tacos. Besides the fact, it was a really, really fun watch. It was awesome getting to hang out with Nathan and, talk shop in person with this team that we've built. And yeah, it was fun. It was super fun. So I think that's, probably enough time on our week that we went through, because now we can get to the main attraction, the star of the show, Mr. Caleb Houstan, who's there's a reason I wanted to start here. There's a reason I wanted to start with Caleb Houstan. So let's talk a little bit about him. Caleb, Michigan guard / forward, depending on, whatever your preference is for the day. 6'8", 205 pounds. Look for his wingspan. Couldn't find anything. Doesn't look like he's got a crazy long wingspan though.
Right.
He's averaging 8.8 points per game, 4.2 rebounds per game, 1.8 assists to 2 turnovers per game, 0.3 blocks, 0.5 steals, shooting splits of 34.7% from the field, 25.8% from 3, 84.6% from the free throw line on limited attempts, and that's a true shooting percentage of 48% for Caleb Houstan. Let's get into his stock price. Preseason, ESPN had him at 5. SB Nation had him at 7. Tankathon had him at 8. Basketball News had him at 5. Bleacher Report had him at 8. He had an average price of 6.8. He was a guy that had a lot of hype as a top 10 player coming into the year. Currently, ESPN has dropped him down to 14. Tankathon has him at 20.
Wow.
Basketball News has him at 16. Bleacher Report has him at 12. SB Nation hasn't updated their rankings, but The Athletic,
Crazy.
Step it up, and The Athletic also has him at 12. So just to get that 5th number in there, that's an average stock price of 14.8. He slid 8 spots early into the season, outside of the lottery on average. So because of that drop, because he's a guy who came into the year as a potential top 10 guy, and because we're still early in the year, I thought that it would be fun to cover him now, because I'm sure we're going to talk about him more as the season goes on. If he turns it around, it's going to be fun to watch his stock, but right now it's trending downward. Albert, I ask you, at 14.8 currently, is Caleb Houstan's stock price too high, too low, or is it just right?
Yeah, I don't like excuse me, I don't like these early season overreactions. For me, 14.8 or 14 whatever is way too low for me. I think we have to keep things in perspective. The kid is what, 18, 19? I have no idea how old he is actually, but he's so young. He's still so raw. It's early in the season. I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me, we're going to get into his eval, right? But Corey, the biggest thing that stuck out to me is I don't believe that this is really a Caleb Houstan issue. From what I watched so far, Corey, not that I want to put blame on Juwan Howard or whatever. It really is a matter of the fact that it's so early in the season. I think they're still figuring him out. I feel like Juwan Howard and the staff there at Michigan, they're still figuring out what is the best way to utilize Caleb Houstan, right? So I think, yeah, the shooting numbers are pretty horrific if you look at just the numbers. I get that. Even eye test, yeah, it hasn't been pretty all the time. But for me, it's way too early to abandon ship and be like, yeah, he should be 14th at the end of the lottery. I hate that, because there's so much still to like about the guy. And obviously we're going to get into that. But yeah, that is way too low for me.
Yeah, I think it's low as well. Now, I think that him dropping, because it's not like he had the AJ Griffin drop. AJ Griffin has just free fall down boards, which I completely don't understand at all. I don't understand it at all. But that's a topic for another podcast day. I think much of what his fall is that not that he has just underperformed, which sure, he started out slow, and he's not the first lottery type prospect to do that. Tyler Rucker wrote a great article today about a bunch of high-level prospects who started out really slow in their first 8 or 9 games, turned it on and showed why they were ranked that high to begin with. Caleb Houstan is perfectly capable of following that trajectory. But I think that there are a lot of other prospects that have kind of played well, and so they've jumped up the board, and that has a little bit to do with him falling slightly because there are other prospects that have showed out a little bit. So I think it's too low. I think he dropped too much. If he rounded out, say 10 or 11, and maybe it's semantics, it's still only a few picks, maybe that feels like the area I'd be more comfortable in, but I don't foresee him falling anymore. And if anything, I think he's going to rise back up. I think he's going to be on that trajectory. But who knows, right? That's why we have a podcast. That's why we follow it, and that's why we're going to break his game down. So let's get into his scouting report. And look, when you think Caleb Houstan, what do you think of?
Passing? No, yeah.
Shooting. You think of the shooting. So that we like to start with the shooting. Let's start with the shooting.
Yeah.
We went through the percentages. 34.7% from the field, 25.8% from three. So when you look at a 3-point shooter, a guy who was billed as a potential elite 3-point shooter, and he comes out and shooting 25% from three, not ideal. Is the percentage indicative of the type of shooter that he is?
1 trillion% no. No, dude. I right now, I'm telling you, there is so many moving parts that are like that go behind those numbers right now. It's a lot, but for me, definitely not. Those numbers are going to go up by a lot over time, in my opinion. I could be wrong. I've been wrong many times before, but I love his jump shot. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I love his jump shot. I love the balance on it. That's something that I really like. Like my favorite shooters, I like when they're like really well balanced shooters, like the guys who like it's hard to explain, but like the footwork always looks pretty with him.
Yeah.
Now of course, yeah, exactly.
Clay.
It all looks good.
Yeah, I get it.
It's beautiful. Kispert last year. But anyway, yeah, I'm super into the jump shot. The numbers don't tell the full story. There's a lot going on behind those numbers. I think he's just going to get better and better.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also a believer in the jump shot. I think when you're this early into the season and you're looking at a guy who is been billed as a shooter and he shoots it so effortlessly and it looks so pretty, you got to trust your eyes sometimes. You can't just fall into this percentage thing because this is where we run into problems with stats. The sample size is too low.
Right.
If you want to have this conversation because he's shooting 25% from three in June or in March or whatever, and we're having this conversation in June, okay, that's a conversation worth having, right? Why did he shoot 25% the entire season? That's a conversation worth having. But it's December 1st right now as we record this. I'm not willing to throw away all of the film that we have before his college season with a guy whose shot looks as pretty as Caleb Houstan's. Now, are there reasons maybe besides him just hitting a cold streak that he's missing some of these shots? Probably, right? Maybe he seems like he's having a somewhat difficult time adjusting to the speed of the game, the length, the closeouts. But this is not a guy who hasn't played with or against high-level talent. He played really, really well in the FIBA tournament for Team Canada as one of the leaders of that team. He struggled percentage-wise in the FIBA tournament as well from three, even though he averaged 17 points per game there. But most of the players, even the good shooters, they do struggle and with that FIBA ball and different style of play. So again, he's not a 25% shooter. I think that he's going to finish out the year somewhere around the 37% mark. And if he can go and finish the year at the 37% mark, I think you're looking at a player whose trajectory is going to, increase in the NBA. And I was looking today because I think one of the guys that I think people are going to talk about him kind of representing, and maybe we will too, is Clay because of, like you said, the footwork and whatnot. Clay had a year, his sophomore year, he shot 36% from three. Clay Thompson's what? undisputably one of the top 5 shooters ever.
Right.
Right. And you could put him in whatever order you want to, as high as 2, I think many people would say. So I think the numbers are going to rise. I am, there's other parts of his game I'm more worried about. The shooting is not one of them. But do you think that he's a guy that is going to create off the bounce?
Yeah.
At the next level.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the very natural next question that I knew you were going to ask. So I actually had that in my notes. I was ready, Corey. We're starting to read each other now, man.
Yeah, it's
I
a
think
dance. We're doing the dance,
Yeah. That's my area of concern. It is. I think the handle is functional.
Yeah.
What I wrote is has a good handle, but not a great one. And
Mhm.
I think the biggest thing that I was thinking about was, and you could see it now, even against like Seton Hall, when he was getting guarded by, a couple of their wings. I know Richardson, right? That's his name? Kadari Richardson,
Kadari,
right?
yeah. Richards? Right?
Richardson?
Yeah, Richardson?
Richmond?
Yeah,
Richard?
Dude.
I'm not sure.
Yo, let me tell you something about. I'm watching that kid on the court.
Yeah.
He looks like guard OG Anunoby. Dude, he is thick. Like he's kind of a beast. That kid. Like
he's the Q's transfer, right?
Yes. Yeah. Kadari Richmond.
Okay.
Kadari
Richmond. I said Richardson. Jesus. It's
Amateur
a Wednesday, guys.
Over here from us.
I will say though, Corey, the amount of college basketball that we're consuming right now, it's kind of like a culture shock for me right now compared to any other point in my life. But anyway, watching Houston against even like a Seton Hall or in Arizona, he struggles, man. Like with the ball in his hands, and he's going against a really tough defender, and he just doesn't have the wiggle, doesn't have the shake, doesn't really separate or create that separation very well. He is not going to be your offensive hub, and I think you kind of have to know that about him. But then again, now once again, we talk a lot about like framing and context or whatever. That's fine. I'm ready to be like, okay, he's never going to be my primary ball handler initiator. That's cool. But as a secondary guy, you throw it to him on the weak side and he's got a little space and he's got a little room to create. That's where he can operate a little bit. I'm okay with that because something that shouts to our boy Tyler Metcalf and the piece that he wrote about Caleb Houston's passing.
Correct.
Houston can pass the ball. He is a really good recycler of the ball, really small, smart ball mover, passer. He can make high difficulty reads, right?
Yep.
He could even do some live dribble passing that I was like,
oh yeah,
nice,
that's
very nice.
That's
stuff. I was really impressed with that. But when it's like one-on-one, like, okay, we're talking about fourth quarter, lights are on, intensity's high, Patrick Beverley's on him, he's gonna struggle big time.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, and that's the thing, right? Because we haven't even got to like the dribble drive stuff. That we're just talking from the context of like him getting his shot off, right?
Right.
But like you said, if he's not going to be your primary, and there's not many guys in every draft that have that capability, it's okay that he's not going to be able to consistently create his own shot. Right. I think it's something he'll probably improve on as he gets older and he goes through his development. But right now, he doesn't have the athleticism, the first step, and like you said, that shake to really be a threat. Like you can kind of play up on him knowing that he's a shooter and not worry about getting blown by. Right. And that makes it harder for him to actually use those combo moves to get his shot off. Now, one of the things he has going for him, 6'8" guy who looks like he could play shooting guard. So he is going to have a height advantage and be able to get that shot off with his height. I think at the next level, if he's playing the 2 spot and, even on as the NBA sizing doesn't seem to matter at all, like even, against some threes and whatnot. But I don't think the self-creation is there. So I think he's going to be a movement shooter and more of, maybe some stuff out of pick and roll. Maybe some stuff out of pick and roll where he can use, a big body to leverage the space that he can't create on his own. And that's fine because you put him in some of these pick and roll situations, like you said, like Tyler Metcalf pointed out in his article on No Ceilings, he can really leverage that that ability to pass the ball and make plays for his teammates and in a really fun way. And I love, like, I look at guys who are good movement shooters, and for me, like, how do you leverage that shooting with the ability to like get downhill and pass? And when I look at his passing, like, I look at guys like a JJ Redick when he was running 2-man game with Joel Embiid, where he would
Oh
come off
yeah,
like dribble handoff actions and
DeAndre Jordan. Yeah.
right away know, like, okay, I know when I come off of these actions and they know I'm a shooter, they're coming out hard and out high on me. So all I got to do is hit that roll man who's slipping these screens, and he's, going to have a nice lane to the hoop. So I look at him, I feel like he could be that, and I think that obviously this Michigan team is not perfect this year. Losing Franz hurts a lot offensively and defensively.
Big time.
But I think that some of the actions that Houstan has been in when he does move around the court and he isn't just planted in a corner standing still, he's shown that he's able to, not just be a guy who is going to be a standstill shooter. He's able to do a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's shooting 34.7% overall.
Mm-hmm. Rough.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about his rim attack, his dribble drive. What do you see? Is finishing going to be an issue in your opinion?
So, Corey, that's my biggest problem. I don't think we've seen enough of it. That is my biggest issue. And it's not just him. A lot of these freshman shooters are getting stuck in a corner.
Yeah.
Max Christie at Michigan State. They throw him in the corner and say, hey, kid, just hang out over there. I'm like, I hate it. I really hate it. Like, I so very much want to talk about Caleb Houstan getting downhill, attacking the rim, going to the bucket, creating things, right? Trying to get a layup. We're just not seeing it. And it really is. We're talking about global pandemics and Omicron and blah, blah, blah. We have a problem in college basketball where if you're really good at shooting and you're a freshman, don't even think about getting out of the corner. You're in the corner forever. And I hate it. With Michigan, I think that's something they really have to work out. I talked about before the context and some of the issues that they have. Right now, with Caleb Houstan, they either have him stuck in the corner or they have him flash out of the corner with a little like dribble handoff action. And then everybody else on the court decides to stand around. Dickinson is, I'm not sure what he's doing when Houstan has the ball. I would love to see Houstan and Dickinson run a little 2-man game, right? How about Dickinson come out, set a screen for Houstan, and then Houstan can either find him, because we know Dickinson can do a little pick and pop, right? He's got a nice little lefty stroke, but it's just not happening. So for me, it's like, how am I supposed to evaluate this kid going to the basket if they're not setting him up to ever get to the basket? I literally counted maybe like 8 or 10 possessions where they would like give him the ball off of a handoff, and like the big would just kind of like stand around and he would have nowhere to go. And he's like, and the shot clock is running, and he kind of puts up like a weird, awkward, like 20-foot jump shot or a 3-pointer. I'm just like, this is why his numbers are trash. You guys are not setting him up for success. And so I don't want to be too angry at Juwan Howard. Obviously, he's doing a great job with that program. But Juwan Howard and Caleb Houstan need more time together to figure this out, because Houstan is not being utilized correctly to the point where, like, literally, Corey, I can't think of one instant of Houstan going to the basket. I can't remember one at all. One drive at all is kind of where I'm at right now. So I don't even think I can give a proper evaluation with him around the bucket. Now, if you go back to high school stuff, you can see it, right? Like, I don't think he's like an unbelievable finisher either. I think you kind of mentioned in passing too, him as an athlete, a little underwhelming, right? Which kind of goes to my comp later for who I have in mind. But for me, like, I just need to see more. I would love to see him attack the basket more, get to the foul line. He's a good free throw shooter. There's so much more that so much more that I think Michigan can tap into with Houstan. It is kind of how I feel right now.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think from a coaching perspective, maybe it becomes like a chicken or the egg thing. Like, does Juwan Howard want to give him more responsibility, more actions when he's not proven that he could make shots or beat guys off the bounce? But can Houstan get into the proper rhythm if he's not getting some of those possessions? So it becomes one of those things where, it's hard. And who knows? I'm sure it'll, get worked out as the season goes on. It's, we're not even in conference play yet. So It's something to monitor, though.
Yeah.
It's definitely something to monitor. But like you said, the physical ability is going to prevent him from attacking the rim consistently. Where I do think he can get to the rim consistently is I love when he does come off movement, especially when he goes like baseline to baseline, corner to corner. He catches the ball, gets his footwork right, gets into his shooting stance, and he could just raise and rip on a hard closeout and get to the hoop. And he's done that a few times, and it's looked smooth. And he's even had some nice finesse finishes that way. But when he's just kind of like creating into space, it gets a little wonky. It gets a little wonky. And I don't think that he's physically ready to and willing to kind of go into the bodies of some of these, bigger, more physical big men. And when you're not willing to go in, take the physicality, draw the foul, you're probably throwing up a shot that's going to kind of be just a weird, awkward attempt at trying to get something at the rim. And so I think that he's got to figure out how to leverage that shot to get to the rim a little bit more and get some easy ones, because especially when you're a shooter, I mean, you got to see some stuff go in sometimes. How do you do that? You either get shots close to the rim or you get to the free throw line. So I think he's got to focus on that a little bit. But at the same time, he's got to play his game and he's got to keep shooting. And I think the more he shoots, the more he gets comfortable with the speed of the game, and just seeing if you go in, I think those percentages are going to pop back up. I think that he's one of these guys offensively. Like, there's not a whole lot to his game. You can watch him once and kind of figure out the type of player that he is. Now, he might have an off night, he might get super hot, but you kind of see it, right? He's that off-ball shooting threat who, can make some nice passes, some secondary reads. Maybe the ball swings to the weak side. He attacks, when the defense is shifted, all kind of stuff like that. But it's not super complicated. Is there anything else that you think that stands out about his offensive game in a either good or bad way?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I did want to say, for as much as he is thrown into a corner, I like how he moves off ball. Yeah, I mean, the only thing is, like, I feel like he's really relegated to that corner a little too much right now. But overall, I felt like off ball, like he was relocating well, off of the strong side action on the weak side. It felt like he was reading all that. He wasn't getting complacent. I think, like, as an 18-year-old who constantly gets thrown into the corner, you can be a little dejected. It could be a little discouraging, but I never got that sense from him while he's on the floor. It always looks like he's engaged. It always looks like he's trying to make the right read, the right cut, the right, whether he is floating out to the corner or to the wing, wherever. That's something that I think he deserves credit for, right?
Yeah.
Because at that age, with what's going on, it's easy to kind of lose your head and not be as focused. But so far, he seems like a really good team guy, a guy who's trying to kind of set himself up to be successful, to catch some passes, to take some shots. So that's like the only last thing that I did want to mention. I feel like because he's working hard and well off ball, more opportunity will come to him, and I'm sure the coaching staff is noticing that as well.
Yeah, and again, he did a lot of fun, exciting things in the FIBA tournament over the summer, and he's he had a great career at Montverde. I'm gonna see him in a few weeks when Michigan comes to Rutgers. Going to see Jaden Ivey next week behind the bench.
So jealous, man.
So I'll be looking a lot of this stuff, but I think the good thing is that, okay, yes, he's a shooter first and foremost, but he's not a one-trick pony, because he does have some of the fun passing genes in his DNA. Let's talk about his defense. I want to get your impression about his defense.
Okay, this might be a bit of a plot twist. I don't know. I'm not sure what you're expecting me to say. I actually loved him on defense.
Okay.
Now, I don't know. Yeah, people may disagree. But my first note is a lot to love about his defense. The thing that stuck out to me the most, Corey, that I was really happy about, and this is something that I know Rucker was really teaching me on to be aware of, but I love how his head is on a swivel, and it's like you could see it. Like, he's actively looking like he's not just watching his man or not just watching the ball. You see his head like constantly moving, very active eyes was what I wrote here that I was impressed by. I love how he moves his feet. I think at his very worst, he'll be a decent defender. Obviously, like, we didn't have a wingspan number on his
Right.
length, but the one thing that I really enjoyed was as a weak side defender, it's not that he's coming to get like weak side blocks, but he is able to make the reads off of like the pick and roll on the other side, and he's getting into passing lanes. He's reading when they're trying to make passes, whether it's inside or out to the weak side corner or whatever. He's very aware. Like, he seems like a very cerebral defender that I really enjoyed. There's an awareness and activity to him that I enjoy. I don't think he has the quickest feet, of course. Like, I think athletically he just has his limitations.
Is
What
his
did you
lower
think?
body shorter than his upper body?
Yeah. We're really connecting now, Corey, man. We're starting to see the same things, man. He definitely is a long torso, short-legged guy. 100%. Maybe that's why I like him so much, because I'm one of those guys. I have a long torso, short legs. But 100% Corey, which is why, like, sometimes when he's defending, he almost looks like a Pez dispenser, because like his legs are short, but like his back is like really straight and has really good posture. But yeah, I actually really liked him as a defender. Not that he's some perfect defender, but I wasn't expecting that at all. Just the engagement and the awareness and the activity, I was pretty impressed, actually.
Okay. The date is December 1st, 2021.
Mhm.
We're almost 50 episodes in. I don't know where
Uh-huh.
we're at exactly, but we're almost 50 episodes in.
hmm
A lot of the listeners have been asking for it,
Okay.
pleading, begging. They say, guys, your analysis is excellent. You truly know your stuff. You
hmm
put in the work,
hmm
but you agree too much.
Oh boy, here we go.
Today's the day, listeners. Here's the first thing that I have about his defense.
Okay.
Woof.
Really?
I hated watching him on defense. I was like, oh man, this kid has miles to go. Now,
Okay.
on the ball, he's okay.
hmm
He's okay on ball. Like you said, he's not a lockdown guy, but he puts in effort, and I think that he's able to at least contain his man one-on-one. Pick and roll defense.
hmm
Okay. He dies on every single screen.
That's fair.
But he doesn't die a nice death at old age of natural causes. He's getting murdered on these screens in a bloody and brutally awful
Mhm.
way that one day Netflix will make a documentary about. Just terrible. Like,
Uh-huh.
and part of it is like, we talked a lot last year about Davion Mitchell, why we were so
Mhm.
high on him, because we thought he was such a special defender.
Yeah.
He gets in your shit. He is wearing
Mhm.
your shirt. Caleb Houstan doesn't have the same kind of physical tools, the same foot speed. To
Right.
do that, he plays off his man a little bit.
Mhm.
And when you do that, it makes it a little bit harder to get skinny over screens.
Mm.
And you add on to that I think that he hasn't yet found the speed of the game. Defense is super, super hard,
Mhm.
right? Especially when you don't have the opportunity to like scout every team over the course of like multiple games and get familiar with their offense and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Right. So I think he's trying to process so much from so many different actions, blah, 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 that like everything's happening a second slow. And on these screens, he's getting murdered on them. He can't get skinny. He can't get up, and because he can't anticipate that a lot of times they're coming, and so he can't get up and around. And he's not going under to meet the ball handler or the shooter, so he's just getting mauled on these screens, and it's leading to some really bad stuff. That it's just like, all right, now the ball handler's downhill. Now it's a little drop off. Now it's a little dump off, right? So in the highlight, it might not even look like it's his fault necessarily, but like everything starts at his point of attack from the pick and roll defense. I didn't love his off-ball awareness either, which is something that you thought you liked. I really
Yeah.
didn't see his head on a swivel all that much. Is it on a swivel sometimes? Yeah, it's moving sometimes. But there are a few possessions where he just got like beat back door so mercilessly. I don't know if that was a word, mercilessly. That I don't even know if he knew the team scored by the time he turned his head around. My least favorite thing, maybe the worst at closing out of anybody we've ever evaluated. His closeouts are atrocious. They're atrocious right now. He leaves his feet. He's up high. He doesn't. It's not choppy feet, down low, close out, hand up. He's like running out, jumping, biting on everything. Always late. It's just like, oh my god! Like who taught? Like have you ever watched defense? Like did he go to a camp ever in his life where they taught him the fundamentals of closing out? It's almost like to a point where I'm like, I can't. Who am I? There's no way that it's this bad. He's got nowhere to go but up. And I think that as he goes through the year, I think the defense will get better because I think that he will learn. But that comes from, putting in work, film, all of that. No longer is he on Montverde Academy.
Right.
Where, yeah, he's played some high-level teams. Jalen Duren ain't backing him up no more, right? Like, he making up for some
Scotty
of these mistakes.
Barnes, yeah.
He's on an island a little bit in a situation maybe he's not used to, but I got to see some improvement there, and that's another reason why I wanted to do him early because we talked about like maybe some overreaction as to why he has dropped, but also like I want to see what his growth is like because this is a guy that like I don't look at him, I don't look at his percentages, I don't look at his defense, and to me like he's not Zaire Williams, who can still prove to be a decent prospect, although the early returns are what I personally expected. I think what you expected, right? I don't think he's like that guy who has a somewhat pretty looking shot and is going to shoot terribly. And defensively, I don't think that. I think he's got room to improve, although he doesn't, even have some of the defensive potential that a guy like Williams has. Because I think Williams had a little bit better physical tools.
Yeah, the length is crazy. Yeah,
the agility I think was a little bit. But yeah, defense. Ooh, not for me. It's not for
Got
me.
it.
But
So
it's not only him though. It's not only him. I think Michigan as a whole was has been pretty rough from a defensive standpoint. And defense is basketball's a team game in general. But like one guy messes something up, all of a sudden guys are scrambling and it's a whole thing. But I was not encouraged by a lot of what I had watched from him defensively. So you wanted it, listeners. You got it. You got it.
Okay. So a little bit of a rebuttal. Now, of course, from what I saw, I'm not going to disagree with what you're saying. Of course, like as I mentioned, I think there's a lot for him to work on. The stuff that I did enjoy though was I want to go back to the weak side stuff just because there were a lot of possessions where when he was defending the offense, they were running like all kinds of screens on the weak side, and there were times from what I saw where he was competing and trying to get over those screens to get out to his man. And I think those were the moments that maybe my brain just highlighted and I kind of came away with a really good impression. So yeah, I definitely agree with you on the closeouts. Like I'm not going to argue that one. Maybe I just wanted to overlook it because of the highlights and the good stuff that I did see.
The effort is not in question. I'm not questioning the effort.
Yeah,
he's playing hard. Even when he's getting hit by these screens, he's trying to get through them.
Right.
He's just trying in the absolute worst way. Like,
but no, I hear you.
Like if I want to get to like the spot behind the building, I'm not trying to go through the building, like through the glass, through the bricks. Like I'm going to drive around it.
Okay. So I agree. The only thing is like, I don't know, maybe it's for me, like, there were so many moments that I saw him weak side where I was like, I really like that. Like there was one where the offense, they ran like a pick and roll They passed it off to the big, and the big actually, I don't remember who the big was, made a nice read, saw a guy in the Duggar spot, and I saw Caleb Houstan come down from the wing and knock the ball out of bounds. And I was like, nice. That is really good. That's a really
Yeah.
smart play. Way to read it. Way to get active with your hands and be there. So maybe, Corey, maybe what it is like maybe this is like one of my bias guys where I have some blind spots with him. Like I just really just want to focus on the good stuff. But yeah, like of course the activity is always there, the effort is always there. And also one thing, Corey, that you mentioned at the end that I 1,000,000,000% agree with you on, his team is kind of bad. Like I've been watching a couple of their games and I'm just like, some of these guys that he's playing with, I won't say them by name because I just don't like being that guy. But some of them are just not good, dude. And
It's
I'm
messy.
like,
It's messy.
it's messy and it's not fun. And I just don't envy Caleb Houstan so far. But anyway, I like that. I like that we disagreed though. This was good. This is fun.
Another thing.
Mhm.
Steal percentage 0.9.
Okay.
Block percentage 1.0. Not good. Like
Mhm.
I don't think that steal and block percentages are the end all be all. As a matter of fact, I think the eye test tells you a lot defensively, right?
Right.
But I'm not ignoring like steal and block percentages. You want that to be much higher for a potential NBA guy. When these, it is we look at those as indicators because defensively, it's hard to match stats as to what translates. You're playing different conferences. You're not, it's not like you're playing all the same NBA competition. You can measure it, right? Like the stats, you have to measure different things. But steal and block percentage are usually good indicators when you're looking at statistics defensively because, you want your potential NBA guys to be so much more physically gifted or have a much higher basketball IQ and nuanced understanding that it just seems a little bit too easy and they can cause havoc. Like you said, he can get in the passing lanes. He's a half a steal a game right now. 0.3 blocks. Now we talked about doesn't have a lot of length, right? So and for me, like you don't need to get a ton of steals because if you could just play the game positionally and contain your man, get guys into the help, guide them there, that's valuable. But it's something he needs to work on.
Yeah.
It's
I hear you.
he's got something, but we disagreed, and I love it.
Yeah.
Okay. If you were buying stock in Caleb Houstan, who may you have bought stock in previously?
Oh, we're going into comps. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna go into comps.
Cool. Okay. I had a couple of names.
Okay.
You mentioned Clay. I think that's fair. Obviously, Clay as a defender. Woo. I mean, unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
So if Caleb Houston's going to get to that level, he's got some work to do.
Let's go. But Clay was not known as a defensive guy coming in.
Of course. What do you attribute that to? Is that the Draymond effect, or what do you think?
I mean, I wouldn't attribute it completely to Draymond, right? I think, but I think that it certainly helps. Yeah, it certainly helps. I think that I mean, when he came in, Bogut was still a good defender as well. Andre Iguodala. But, Clay was taking on the challenge of guarding a lot of times, the high level players. So but defense is a team. It's a team game. Defense is a team game.
Yeah.
And these high level guys are going to score points as much as you can. You just do what you can to contain him. But Clay, he moved his feet well. And he does intelligent things on the court. He's coached well and he plays with intelligent guys. So I think that hard work, film study, and work ethic, and just wanting to get better and wanting to play hard. Who knows? Maybe he goes somewhere else and he doesn't play every possession as a championship level defender, right? But that's the environment that he grew up in, and as an NBA player, and you learn from that and you feed off that, and it's hard to take plays off when you got Draymond barking at you, right? So it's probably a little bit of that.
Okay, that's fair. So I'm going to stay away from the Clay one. So our listeners might say that I'm like lazy for these comps, but I just kind of saw it, dude. Like if you consider So the first guy I'm going to mention was a little bit better of an athlete, or maybe not, dude. Maybe they really were comparable as athletes. Like I think the fluidity, they're pretty comparable. The guy that I'm thinking of was a slam dunk champion. Was he a slam
Okay.
dunk champion? Or he was at least in the slam dunk contest. Number 20 for the New York Knicks. Allen Houston was the first guy that I thought of, right?
Ooh,
Obviously,
No, I
different
like it.
types of shooter. Yeah, different types of shooters. Of course, Allen Houston was a big elevation guy. You watch if you go back and watch Allen Houston, this guy was jumping to the moon on every single jump shot. So Houston's not that type of shooter in terms of like the technique, but
Mhm.
you can see some similarities. You know, Allen Houston wasn't like a huge ball handler. Of course, he could get his shot. Was a technician in the mid range. Something we didn't even talk about that. What do you think about Houston in the mid range, really quickly?
I believe in the shot
Yeah,
at every level,
right,
even if the
right.
percentages don't bear it out.
Mhm, mhm.
And I think you've seen some positive and some negative. Like was it the Arizona game? I think he had one miss that was just like clanked off the side of the bat,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
he was on like the wing coming off on the right side, and he like
Mhm,
missed long, and it like hit the backboard, and you're like, all right. But again, it's like the same thing. It's like the defense, the speed of
right.
the game, and him figuring out how to get that kind of stuff off. I think it'll
Mhm.
work itself out, and I buy the shot.
Yeah,
I think I think he's a good shooter. I would
yeah.
I'm still confident in the shot.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Allen Houston, like that's kind of, the mid-range was a big part of his game. He was an
Yeah.
absolute killer
Well,
from there.
he would
Of
he would be
course, of
jacking
course.
threes.
hmm Which is what Caleb Houston may become, right?
Yeah.
Modern day Allen Houston. And then another guy that I had because of I think they're like similar sizes, right? I think, with this guy, he was a multiple time All Star,
Mhm.
eventually lost his knees, kind of like Allen Houston, went to the same alma mater. I wonder if you know who I'm talking about. I'm thinking of Glenn Rice here.
Oh,
And the reason why I'm thinking of Glenn Rice, another guy, movement shooter, but also because of like different times, right? Glenn Rice also was a guy who was a really great mid-range shooter and liked to live in that space when he was with Miami, when he was with Charlotte, but an absolute killer jump shooter. Just
yeah.
a beautiful, beautiful jump shooter. I remember growing up, I was reading this book. I can't remember what the hell the book was, but there was this portion on Glenn Rice, and it was talking about how Glenn Rice, the reason why he was such a good shooter was because he used to shoot in the dark. And he would tell himself, like, if he could shoot in the dark, then he could then he could shoot when the lights came on. I don't know why that always stuck with me. And I was always like, yeah, Glenn Rice is freaking awesome. And then got
Shoot the
traded to the
lights
Knicks
out.
and yeah, exactly. And then he got traded to the Knicks after he won the title with the Lakers. It was a nightmare. But I I thought of Glenn Rice because not just because of the Michigan connection, but a limited athlete. Glenn Rice also around 6'7", 6'8", but pure shooter, a really, really great shooter who eventually lost his knees and wasn't the same. But he had about 50-point games in Miami. The guy was a really, really high level offensive player and eventually won a title with the Lakers. So yeah, I thought of Glenn Rice. I just, yeah, there's something about Houston's game where I think a limited athlete, really good shooter. I think he's going to continue to develop. Obviously, I'm definitely a lot higher on him defensively than you are, but that's okay.
Sure.
It's okay,
Sure.
right? But yeah, I like these comps because they're shooters, number
Mm.
one. And
Yep.
also, they weren't like huge creators with the ball in their hands, but were very good NBA players who made all star teams and made a lot of money in the league. And one of them won a title, and one of them went to the finals and didn't win because the Spurs were really good. So that's kind of where my head was at. I know both of them are 90s guys, but that's just kind of where my
That's
head went to with them.
that's your thing. That's what I love.
Yeah.
I love that about your comps. That's why it's one of my favorite segments of the show. Obviously, again, Clay. I think that just I love the balance on the shot, the way that it's so consistent.
Right.
It looks the same, the way he gets into it, all that. I think that's the kind of role that I envision him thriving in the NBA. Again, I'm not saying he's going to be a top 5 shooter of all time. Chances are he won't.
Yeah,
Most
probably
NBA
not.
players are not. But
hmm
I think he'll be a good enough shooter that you can envision him in that role, and maybe that makes him a poor man's Clay. I also kind of went with another guy, and I don't know what part of Canada Caleb Houston is representing. I don't know if they do speak French there in the part of Canada that he's from, but I went with a Frenchman, Evan Fournier.
Okay. Yes, that's awesome, dude. That's what I was. Okay, perfect. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really good.
yeah. I mean, Evan Fournier. I think when he was younger, he could put you on a poster, but he needed a runway, right? He wasn't gonna like break you down off the bounce, and all of a sudden, he's Vince Carter, like tomahawk on Alonzo Mourning. But if he was able to come off movement, get downhill with a little bit of space, he can get up and attack the rim in a strong way. Smooth shooter, can create for himself a little bit, but it's not how he's ultimately thriving as a player. You're going to
Correct.
want him running off of movement, getting open, just off the ball, creating havoc that way. You could spot him up, space the floor. And another guy whose shot looks the same most of the times that he's shooting it, and I think has some athletic limitations physically when competing with like the elite athletes of the NBA. So Fournier, which sounds like a dig almost, right?
No,
But
he
Fournier,
made 70 mil, dude.
yeah, more. I mean, just on his last contract, right?
Right,
I
right.
mean, he's dude's made over 100 mil in the NBA by the time he's going to retire.
Hmm.
Played on some playoff teams, right? And I think that if you said like, you're getting a Fournier level player in the lottery, that's a win. That's a win.
I agree with you. I
So
agree with you.
that's where my mind went. Evan Fournier.
Hmm. Really quickly, Corey, I have one more. He
Okay, let's
doesn't
hear it.
have the handle or
Mhm.
the driving ability of this guy, but when you watch like their physiques, they're kind of similar. Alec Burks, like
Okay,
kind
yeah,
of the kind of the long torso, short leg type of guys. Of course, Burks is awesome going to the rim, and he's got handle, but just like physique wise, he kind of reminds me of Alec Burks too.
yeah,
Was
like
kind of
good
where, yeah,
size. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, yeah, I
yeah.
get it. You want to throw in some Knicks talk into the pod.
You know
All
me too
right.
well.
How volatile is Caleb Houstan?
In my mind, I don't see him being very volatile because I think we know what he's going to be. And like you said, right? It's very predictable what he's going to be on both sides of the floor. Like I think I know you were lower on him defensively, but I also do believe like you think there's room to grow. You said that. You outright said that.
Yeah, I'm not
With
out on him
coaching,
defensively
yeah,
in the long
hmm,
term. I just think that he's early on.
yeah,
I just didn't enjoy
correct.
watching it.
Correct. And so,
Yeah.
like, I think it's very clear what he's gonna be. Like, I really love your Fournier comp because I thought of that too before when you were talking because as a secondary ball handler, he's gonna be fine. Like,
Yeah.
because he can pass the ball. Of course, the handle I think has to get a little bit better. But you know what type of shooter he's gonna be. You know his physical limitations. He doesn't really have pop. The guy doesn't jump very high. He's not very quick, but he has savvy to his game. Defensively, if he continues to improve, that's there. One thing that I wanted to say, like physically, he looks like he has the frame where he's going to add muscle too. I
Hmm.
don't, by no
Yeah.
means do
Yeah.
I think he's going to be some skinny kid. So yeah, I don't think there's much volatility to him because I think no matter how high or low you may be on him, I think everyone is going to kind of come to a consensus. Oh, this guy's going to play 12 years in the league and
Yeah.
be good. Will he make an all-star team? Maybe, maybe not. But regardless, like you could definitely see him being on a contender and being a contributor to contending teams. So I would say I don't think he's very volatile at all.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with that. I don't think that he's a guy that I look at and be like, no, this is a bust. Now, maybe with the rise in the play of some of these other guys, if you were to like
Hmm.
take him at his pre-draft slot, maybe
Yeah.
you could be like, all right, he's a bust because we missed out on these other guys. But if you're getting him anywhere 10 and on, I think at this point, I think you're looking at a guy, like you said, he's going to have a long NBA career and he does a lot of things that NBA teams want. And he's the type of guy that is going to be scheme versatile. Like you don't have to
Hmm.
play a certain way. He doesn't have to play like one way to thrive. Like he's going to be able to fit in as a sidekick or as a tertiary guy off of, an NBA star. And I think if at that part of the draft, I think that's valuable. Good players are going to be valuable. And I look
Right.
at like the lack of shooting right now where it's at, and like I said, I think it's going to go up. But I feel about his shooting very much so how I felt like about Maxi's shooting, where like, okay, the numbers aren't awesome, but like
Hmm.
I'm watching it and it looks like it's going to be awesome at some point.
Right.
And
Right.
now it's been pretty awesome, you know, in the NBA. So like I don't think that he's a guy that should drop all the way down to the 20s like Maxi did when it's, he does
Right.
offer something that I think is going to hit as an NBA
Hmm.
skill. And I think he could be a guy that you could bank on shooting close to 40% from behind the arc on like super high volume for a long time. How the rest of his game develops, how he looks shooting the rest of the way, I don't know. But I think he is safer than his percentages actually tell us.
Yeah.
All right, it's that time, Albert, Mr. Garbage Time Gim. It's time.
Hmm.
Sell me this pen on Caleb Houstan.
Okay. It's as simple as this. If you are trying to build a contender, you need all different parts, right? Something that I was thinking about yesterday is you need people who are going to be starters and closers. Back in the early 2000s, John Smoltz, a pitcher for the Braves, for most of his career was a starter. And then as he got older, they shifted him into a closer, and he was excellent as a closer, and then eventually went back to being a starter. John Smoltz was the type of guy who can start games and carry you through 7 innings of a game, but also showed later on in his career a guy you can rely on in the ninth inning. Um, I'm going on this rant right now because I believe in basketball, you have all kinds of players as well. You have guys who will carry you through 3 quarters and be excellent, but won't really be there for the fourth quarter, as LeBron James was for the early parts of his career. No slight. I mean, that was the joke back then, right?
It
If
was
you
a joke
ask
back then.
LeBron, if you ask LeBron for change for $1, he doesn't have that fourth quarter for you, right?
That was
Was kind of how it
the
was.
yep.
Hmm.
That was the
That was
early internet memes. Yes.
early internet joke, right? With LeBron. Um, you need all types of players on your team. I don't know if Caleb Houstan is going to be a fourth quarter closer, but every good team needs guys who are going to be great in the first quarter, in the second quarter, in the third quarter. Caleb Houstan has a premium skill, and that premium skill is shooting. As Corey just mentioned, the numbers don't really tell that story right now, but the eye test does. The aggression does in terms of him being a confident shooter, right? There are a lot of different moving parts as to why he's struggling right now, but he is very clearly going to be a very good shooter for, I think, his whole career. And so if you're a contending team that needs different parts to your team, you're not going to ask Caleb Houstan to be your number one. You may not even ask him to be your number two, but he could be a really good number two, a really good number three. And essentially, if you want to be a team that has championship aspirations, you're going to want a guy like Caleb Houstan. I think he's going to develop defensively. I think he's going to develop his handle. His playmaking is going to be there. He's already a very good passer, ball mover, shooter. So if you're into a guy like that and you're building a team towards a championship, you're not going to be doing yourself a disservice by taking a guy like Caleb Houstan.
I'm buying. I'm buying. I'm buying. Like I said, especially at this price, we're getting this low
Yeah.
price. Come on. Almost 15 out of the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
You can get Caleb Houstan out of the lottery. Give me it. I want it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Albert. I think that's going to do it for our Caleb Houstan talk. That was fun. I'm glad we had our first big disagreement on the show. Almost 50 episodes in.
Mm-hmm.
You recently put out, I think on Thanksgiving you put out you're taking out the trash, right? You wrote on Will Richardson. So tell the people where they could find that and find you on the internet and anything else that you did. The No Ceilings podcast you guys did. Let's hear it all.
Yeah, and I kind of got the short end of the stick by releasing my article on Thanksgiving morning. Maybe a total of 12 people read my column, but it's okay, dude. I had a lot of fun writing that column, writing about Will Richardson. Will Richardson, a guy who is struggling mightily for Oregon right now, a guy who people had a high expectations for heading into this season as an upperclassman for that Oregon team, but he's struggling. But a guy that I'm not giving up on, a guy that I think will eventually be a pretty good player. I just think he's had a rough start to the season. But anyway, that was my piece on Will Richardson, with a lot of Succession talk in there as well. For our listeners out there, if you love Succession, there's a good chunk of Succession talk in there. I did my favorite thing in life. I got to slight the New England Patriots and their new savior in Mac Jones, who can go to hell. No, I'm just kidding. That's a little harsh.
Let's pump the brakes on this Mac Jones stuff, right?
Yeah, screw Mac Jones.
We pump
Screw
the brakes
the
here.
Patriots. Yeah, screw Matthew Judon and their
what's Mac Jones look like in Jacksonville this year?
Good question, Corey. He looks like ass in Jacksonville. That's what he looks like. And they just decided to go to town on Thanksgiving food and mac and cheese and
unbelievable. One of the
worst.
The
fact
takes.
that Mac Jones doesn't like pie, dude. Screw you. No one likes you, is what you need to hear from the general public, buddy. Because if you don't like pie, how the hell? I have no idea. He's a sick man, a sick man. But anyway, I got to write about that stuff. It did a pod with Rucker in Vegas, where we were covering all the Chad and Watson and Jaquez and all that stuff. We gushed over Jaquez a ton on that pod.
That's what we call on location, Albert, in the biz.
On location, on site, is what we were doing, which was a lot of fun. That was my first time potting with Rucker, just like one-on-one, and he is a handful. That man is a ball of energy and chaos. So that was a lot of fun. Yeah, you guys find me on the internet at Alberto Gim, at GTGNBA are my two handles. I'm really working on this Strother piece that I want to drop soon, because he's someone who's a lot of fun. And Corey, I think Strother is a guy that you are probably going to be really high on. I don't know how much you've seen of him.
Yeah, I watched a ton of the Zags so far.
Yeah,
he's definitely popped. So
yeah, I like him a lot.
Yeah,
and he's a good. Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of tools. He's got a lot of fun tools at a like. I'm excited to read your piece on him.
For us, for the amount of arguing we did today, we're still on the same page, because you said he has a lot of tools. I was about to say he's a utility guy, so
yes,
we're still vibing. But yeah, that's where you can find me. That's the stuff that I'm working on. Yeah, I will continue to pump out tweets about my love affair with Hyunjung Lee from Davidson, and another guy that I'm going to be writing about really soon, because he just popped off for 32 points against Charlotte yesterday. So yeah, anyway, that's enough for me.
Fantastic. Love it. You can find me at Corey Teleba on Twitter. You can read my piece that just went up at No Ceilings called Draft Punk, where I kind of talked about why I started covering the draft and what I love about the draft, and how it reminds me of how I grew up in the punk rock scene when I was touring, and just falling in love with the underground and getting to know these players before they pop off in the NBA, and all the connections that I found through these two scenes that I love, and the community. And the community comes from like all of our listeners that are listening so intently. You know, Spotify's doing that Wrapped thing. You know, this,
yeah.
And you know, it told like there's one for the podcast, and it's like 36 countries. We got people listening from, like, crazy amounts of downloads, and for a podcast that hasn't even been around for a year right now. I think we've only been around for like 9-10 months. It said the first one was in February. I mean, you know, it's humbling, some of these stats, and that's part of the community that we're trying to build with the Draftdaq, and it's part of the community we're building at No Ceilings, with all of our collaborations, and I just found so much in common with that, and how we should all lift each other up and not have this big head and think that you can only get things right in an imperfect, rigged game, that you can't always win because you could like a prospect that just goes to a bad situation, and your evaluation could have been solid. It just didn't work out sometimes. So let's celebrate that and learn from it and grow together. And that's what we're doing. So I wrote about that, and man, we're going to release our first cumulative No Ceilings like big board, which is like 8 of us trying to figure out who we should rank in the top 30 together. It's going to be fun. It's a lot of fun things. So follow No Ceilings at No Ceilings NBA, and subscribe to the free Substack at noceilings.substack.com. Please, if you have not yet, leave us a review. Some 5 stars would be cool, but you could be honest with yourself. Leave us however many stars you feel is appropriate, right? But 5 would be, the ideal one that we would prefer. And share it and rate, review, all that good stuff. Thank you for listening. Thank you for rocking with us. We are back. This was we've been in season 2 for a while, but this was the first official solo episode with college ball having been played. So very exciting stuff.
Wow.
Very exciting stuff. And we're in for a fun year. So until next week, y'all, we appreciate you listening, rocking with us. Let's go. We out. Peace.
Peace.